Welcome back to Cartridge Talks. In this episode, my good friend Ryan and I seek to discover what is the best turkey gauge for you. What's up, Vortex Nation? Before we get to this video, wanted to let you know about a really cool opportunity to win a brand new turkey rig. We're giving away one of the shotguns featured in this video. Ryan, which are?
A Mossberg 500 turkey in 410, a Mossberg SA28 in 28 gauge, a Mossberg 500 turkey in 20 gauge, or a Mossberg 835 Ultimag in 12 gauge.
To enter, simply sign up for the Vortex Nation newsletter. If you're already signed up, you're good to go. But wait, there's more. If you comment on this video, limit one comment, you can earn an extra entry. Giveaway runs 4/14 to 5/10, 2024. Good luck.
So for this test, we selected the most popular gauges, 12, 20, 28, and 410. And we used a variety of different shot styles and sizes. Two distances, 20 yards, 50 yards from a standing position. Got a multitude of shotguns. We tried to keep things as standard as possible. We're sticking with OF Mossberg & Sons products. We've got Jeb's choke tubes. We've got Apex TSS. We've got Winchester Longbeard XR, and we've got some Vortex Defender Series red dots. We set up a standardized target. We're looking at mean pattern densities in a 10-inch circle at these two distances, again, 20 and 50 yards. Mark and I tediously counted all those little pellet strikes, and we put together what we think is going to be the definitive way to choose the best shotgun gauge for you.
It is important to note results will vary. There are lots of variables at play here, shotguns, chokes, things like that. What you're using will determine the ultimate outcome, but this is a fantastic snapshot into what you might be able to expect. Let's head to the range, subject ourselves to some violent recoil, and see what we find out. All right, a brief explanation before we begin. We're starting off with the 410. We're starting at 20 yards, and we're shooting off shooting sticks for recoil mitigation and stability. Now, Ryan, what are we going to be pushing through this thing?
Turkey Ninja. Turkey Ninja is a 3-inch, 7/8 ounce, 9.5 pellet size in the TSS loading. It's leaving the muzzle at 1,060 feet per second.
Let's see how it does.
Next up at the 20-yard line is the SA28, a 28 gauge autoloader with the tungsten super shot. This is 1 ounce and 3/8 of 9.5s. That's pretty spicy for a 28 gauge. Let's give it a roll.
Let's check it out. All right, next up from the 20-yard line, the 20 gauge. This is the Apex Tungsten Super Shot, 1 ounce and 5/8 of number 9s. It's pretty heavy.
It's heavy for a 12 gauge.
Let's give her a rip.
As Mark had mentioned, for many years, 12 gauge was the standard by which all things were measured with respect to turkey woods. This is in excess. This is 2¼ ounces of TSS number 9s at 1,190 feet per second. I did the math last night, and this is generating 89 foot-pounds of recoil energy out of this gun that I'm about to break myself with, which for contrast is about 10 foot-pounds more recoil energy than a 12-pound 470 Nitro Express double rifle that you would use for shooting elephants.
I did the math on shooting 4 shotguns, taking turns. There's a reason I started with the 410. Good luck. All right, once again, we're at the 20-yard line with the 20 gauge. This is one of our lead loadings. It's the Winchester Longbeard XR, as we mentioned before. Let's check it out. My liege.
We're back on the 20-yard line with Old Painless here, the Mossberg 835 Ultimag. We're going to be shooting the Longbeard XR number 6s. This is an 1 7/8 at just over 1,050 feet per second. I'm so looking forward to this.
All right, we've backed up to the 50-yard line, the second of the 2 distances we're going to be shooting today. We got our trusty 410. Ryan, what's on the docket first?
Turkey Ninja.
Turkey Ninja.
We're on the 50-yard line with the Mossberg 28 gauge autoloader and the Apex Tungsten Super Shot 28 gauge. Let's see what happens.
$50 yards, 20 gauge, TSS. Anything else, Ryan? Let's check that pattern.
We're on the 50 with the 12 gauge against my pleas and better judgment. This Apex TSS 12 gauge is nearly 3 times the mass of their 410 Turkey Ninja loading. May God have mercy on me.
All right, 50 yards, rocking the Winchester Longbeard XR 20 gauge, number 6 shot. Really interested to see how this contrasts its TSS counterparts, Ryan.
I'm in.
Let's check it out.
After subjugating myself to hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of foot-pounds of recoil energy, we're going to fire the last shot out of the 12 gauge today. This is the Winchester Longbeard XR lead round, 1 7/8. Let's see how this plays.
Ryan, you could say we took a shotgun approach to this experiment. I'm looking forward to getting up to the studio, blasting through our findings to see if we find any patterns.
I have a headache.
First up, we're going to analyze the good old-fashioned 12 gauge and the Apex TSS load. We were pushing through it. Now, Ryan, this was a 3-inch loading, shooting number 9 shot, 2 1/4 ounces of 9 shot to be exact, and a total pellet count of 814. I mean, this is an absolute hornet's nest.
Yes.
Now, we talk about analyzing it. How did we go about analyzing it?
Mark printed off this fantastic transparency with a 10-inch circle because Ryan didn't do a great job necessarily of centering the target up. So Mark and I did our best to overlay that transparency on what we figured was the median center of the pattern, and then tediously counted each and every single pellet strike within that 10-inch circle to give us a good understanding of what we had for pattern performance at that respective distance.
Now, this is the 20-yard target. So Ryan, what did we find out?
752 pellet strikes in a 10-inch circle at 20 yards.
That's a lot.
That's a lot. And if we assign like a muzzle energy of 4 pounds per pellet, and then we move that down 20 yards in range here, we have 1,504 foot-pounds of potential energy on that target in that 10-inch circle. And I think most importantly, despite my inability to center that pattern up perfectly on our target here, it's extremely concentric. There are very, very few holes and very, very few errant flyers, like perhaps a dozen or so. The bulk of that pattern really is in that 10-inch circle. It's astounding. Dead turkey, question mark?
Got him. Now let's look at the 50-yard target. Okay, same loading at 50 yards. What are we seeing here?
Pattern is obviously going to disperse. We're going out at distance. We're still staying quite uniform, actually. I'm still a little favored high on the target, but 243 pellet strikes within that 10-inch circle. A few things to note. We're losing energy as we go down range here. So we're at about nominally 1 foot-pound per pellet. So we're still impacting that 10-inch circle with 243 foot-pounds of energy. Again, I beg the question, Mark, is that a dead turkey?
I say undoubtedly yes. Now we also shot a lead option out of this bad boy, the Winchester Longbeard XRs, often considered the standard when it comes to lead options, or at least one that people select a lot of the time. Shall we contrast this with that?
We shall.
Now this is a 3-inch, 1 7/8 ounce loading of number 6 shot with approximately 422 pellets. Ryan, that's nearly half of the TSS loading.
To be expected. The number 6 is a much larger pellet than the number 9, and there's kind of an advantage to TSS and small shot size there, but a 6 lead has been the standby for as long as I've been hunting turkeys. It absolutely works.
Now a lot of folks are using number 5 shot as well. We selected number 6 to give these lead loadings the best chance of catching up. So the question is, what did we see here?
Well, in that same 10-inch circle at 20 yards, we ended up with 374 pellet strikes, which is putting 748 foot-pounds of potential energy on that target. And the pattern density is pretty good. Now, a few things I will note. There's a little bit of vertical stringing here, and there's a couple of really far flyers. And again, larger shot size, crammed in there. It's still a high pellet count. 422 is not a low pellet count, especially for something like this. This is kind of not out of the norm, so to speak. So, good pattern density, good impact on target, unquestionably a dead turkey. That's nearly into, what do they call it, jelly heading them?
Yes.
Yeah, it would work.
You got them, but let's have a look at 50 yards. All right, Ryan, some interesting stuff going on with this one. It looks to me like some things are starting to reveal themselves.
You're correct, and that's that pattern getting kind of sporadic, certainly spreading out, continuing on its vertical stringing trend.
When we were counting pellets, we also noticed some things with density throughout the pattern. Can you point some of that out?
Mark is talking about is holes in our pattern, and there are quite a few of them. So if I take my fist, I can overlay it in parts of the pattern that are otherwise near the center that are completely devoid of pellets. Now, this isn't a fault of the loading, this isn't a fault of the shotgun, this isn't a fault of the choke tube, rather a combination of all of them. And this is what Mark was alluding to earlier. When you're trying to find a turkey load and you're trying to find a choke tube, we also have to consider the individual firearm and how all those 3 components go together as a system for optimal pattern performance. But this still isn't bad. In that 10-inch circle, which Mark and I moved the kind of median center up to here, we ended up with 93 strikes. We're at about a foot-pound per pellet at that distance. Interesting, a number 9 TSS at that same distance is carrying the same amount of energy, but is doing it with a smaller pellet, possibly better penetration. 93 strikes in a 10-inch circle at 50 yards, 93 foot-pounds of potential pattern energy. Not bad.
This really shows the importance of patterning your shotgun at close and extended ranges. If I were to only look at the 20-yard target, I'd be like, oh my gosh, this is absolutely maybe the best I can get. You look at it at 50, you go, maybe there's some room for improvement. And again, no fault of the tools here, just how they're working together.
So, 12 gauge on the whole. Is it the best turkey gauge for you? I suppose it depends. Most folks have a 12 gauge. Ammunition availability is off the charts. It's arguably the most popular gauge for turkeys, has been for decades. A couple things I'll point out. You're going to contend with recoil. The 2 1/4 ounce TSS load, ferocious recoil, akin to like 470 Nitro Express out of that gun. It's been a long time since I've taken a step back from a firearm when I pulled the trigger, and when I did, Mark looked at me and he said, dude, are you okay? Because it was a lot to hold on to. I think if you have a 12 gauge, you can find an awesome load, an awesome choke, and have stellar results. Just know that you're going to contend with a bit of recoil.
Here we have our 20 gauge, and here we have the 20 gauge TSS loading. Ryan, this was a 3-inch, 1 5/8 ounce load of TSS number 9 shot. What did it do here?
Well, there was a 590 pellet count launch at the muzzle. We put 545 pellets into the target at 20 yards.
I mean, I think what we're looking at here, we have a high density of pellets as well as likely the wad pushing through the target. but most of those pellets are in that 10-inch circle.
And really good uniform pattern. There is a little bit of horizontal flyers going on here, but by and large, the bulk of it is all centered where we wanted it to go. So the potential energy of the shot shell at the muzzle was about 2,360 foot-pounds, if we're counting 4 foot-pounds for every single one of those furious little pellets in there. On target, we ended up with 1,090 foot-pounds of potential energy in there. And again, I really want to touch on why pellet count and why pellet density does up the game from a lethality perspective. The more pellets you have, the more energy they carry, the more energy downrange is going to be deposited on the target. And with the wad, that's a bonus projectile.
At 20 yards, a lot of depositing here.
Yes. Dead turkey?
Very. Now, Ryan, in the movie Vacation, original Vacation, the best, I think, Chevy Chase jumps the family truckster 50 yards, wherein he says, "Nothing to be proud of."
That's nothing to be proud of, Rusty.
Now, I think he was proud, and I think this 20 gauge has a lot to be proud of at 50 yards as well. Let's look at the target.
Wow, Mark, that was a great transition to the 50-yard target. In that same 10-inch circle, we have 180 pellet strikes. That's nearly 100 more than the Longbeard XR did at 50. And again, number 9 shot versus number 6 shot, there should be an expectation of more pellets on target. But it is bringing more potential energy to the target. We dropped to about a foot-pound nominally per pellet at that distance. It's 180 foot-pounds on that target. Pattern density is still pretty uniform, although I'm starting to see a couple holes here and there. And again, I think that a little choke tube play might change that. I think the shot shell is pretty much optimized at the best of its capacity, what it can do. Maybe a choke amendment and you see something different. This could also be as good as it gets for this particular loading, this particular gun, and that particular choke.
At the end of the day, dead turkey?
Dead bird.
All right, I'm gonna lead us into our 20 gauge lead loading, Ryan. This is a 1 1/4 ounce, number 6 shot, 3-inch shell. Looking at it, 20 yards, I'm quite impressed.
Absolutely. 281 pellets at launch. 245 made it to our 10-inch circle. That's good for 490 foot-pounds of potential pattern energy on that target.
Extremely impressive.
Yes.
But what does it look like at 50 yards? Let's find out. I still like what I'm seeing here, Ryan, but a lot fewer pellet strikes.
Well, I think that's because we only started with 281.
That would stand to reason.
It does look like we're getting to the threshold of limitation of maybe this load, choke, and gun combination, because we're starting to get some pretty big holes in the pattern here and there. We still ended up with 53 strikes in a 10-inch circle, and they're pretty well centered. There's not crazy errant flyers, and overall I am pretty happy with it. We're still dropping 53 foot-pounds of energy on target, which is sufficient, as we determined in our last from 10 to 100 pattern test video. But I think this is it. I think this is a limit of how far I'd be willing to push this particular load with this particular choke and this particular gun.
Dead turkey at 50? Yes, but like you say, in my personal opinion, and it sounds like yours, we've reached its threshold of efficacy.
I agree.
So to close the action on this, Ryan?
Great pun, Mark. 20 gauge, is it the gauge for you? Well, I made the switch last year personally. It's gonna be very hard for me to move myself from that position. There's a couple things about the gauge I really love. With specialized loads like TSS, I have huge payload. I'm really not giving much up to the old 12 gauge that I was running before. I have a lighter weight shotgun, which I can carry longer when I'm doing all day hunts, and I have less recoil, which I really appreciate because I really hate recoil. For me, 20 gauge, I think strikes that perfect balance.
Ryan, you are absolutely correct. It shines with these modern TSS loadings, and I love the fact that you've gone to the 20 gauge. But I wonder after we analyze the 28 and the 410, if that's still gonna be your answer. Let's find out. All right, new shotgun, new gauge. This is the Mossberg SA28. 28 stands for 28 gauge, the only auto loader in our lineup. They didn't make a pump version, so we went with the auto here to represent the 28 gauge class. This is a 2 3/4 inch, 1.3/8 load of TSS 9.5s. So we've gone down a little bit in shot size, but looking at the target at 20 yards, I'm really impressed.
Probably our highest ratio of launch count relative to impact count. 610 of those little 9.5s in that shell, 592 made it to target. 888 foot-pounds of potential pattern energy on that target. That is impressive.
If you're a turkey's head, you're going, ugh. Let's see how that at 20 translates to 50. Looking at the 50-yard target, Ryan, the 28 has maintained that beautiful circular pattern of pellet strikes, and a lot of them.
194. That's 194 foot-pounds of energy on that target at 50 yards. That's impressive. That is 100 more than the 50-yard number 6 Longbeard XR out of the 12 gauge.
It's crazy to think about.
Yes.
Crazy enough to work.
I think so. I think that's a dead turkey.
So are you a 28 guy now?
Well, here's the thing. 28 gauge has come back in vogue very recently, and I actually think because of TSS. We've taken what was considered a very small bore shotgun, appropriate for like grouse, partridge, quail, rabbits, and really brought it up to kind of whatever winged game you would want to hunt with it. I've got some good friends of mine that hunt geese, ducks on the regular with 28 gauge. They are all shooting TSS shot, and they're certainly pleased with it. It is absolutely anchoring birds. They feel they've given up nothing over their 12 gauge. I do own a 28 gauge, which I hunt grouse and partridge with. Because of how light that gun is, it's actually quite hard to control for wing shooting, but for static targets like turkeys, boy, that'd be pretty hard to argue with.
It has been interesting to see what once was maybe a boutique-y gauge, now becoming a lot more mainstream.
It is, yeah. Ammo availability's crawling up there too. I still don't think it's where 20 gauge is at, and I'm still pretty anchored in 20 gauge territory. But 28 gauge is a compelling tool for a turkey gun.
Wouldn't hesitate to use it.
No. Now you'll notice we jumped right into the 410 because we don't have a 28 gauge lead loading and we don't have a 410 lead loading either.
Now, why is that, Ryan?
Well, because we're on the marginal side of the gauge and we can't cram a lot of number 6s into a 28 gauge or a 410, so we're going to use TSS.
I think also if you look back at the performance of the 20 gauge lead loading at 50 yards, like we said, you're reaching that threshold of performance there. Stands to reason we're not going to do that over here. I will say the 410, often considered a kid's bore. Nothing child's play about this though.
Mark, that was really good. You're right, 403 pellets out of the muzzle. 328 of them hit that 10-inch circle. 328 pellets.
I mean, and that's 328 pellets, 9.5 shot. So again, we've stepped down in shot size, but I don't think we're losing much at the same time.
No, we're still putting up 492 foot-pounds on that target at 20 yards.
I'm more than impressed with the 410.
It's a dead turkey.
But is it a dead turkey at 50 yards?
Let's look. It's 4 and 10 at the 50.
Go with that, that's great.
We're rolling with that.
Oh, well, you love sports so much, it makes sense.
Big sports guy.
Throw football.
No.
Let's look at this.
Okay, so 96 pellets on target. That's 3 more than the Longbeard XR 12 gauge could put up.
Unbelievable.
96 foot-pounds in a 10-inch circle.
This is a 410 at 50 yards. 50 yards!
Not a kid's gun anymore.
Not at all. Would I use it at 50? Yes. Do I think it's about at its limit? Yes. But is it impressive?
Yeah.
Yes. The 410, it's back, baby.
The 410 is back, and I really think that it was the turkey market that brought it there. You know, from a wing shooter's perspective, it's like an expert's gauge. It's the hardest gauge to break clays with. It's the hardest gauge to anchor flying birds with, but in the turkey woods, it's very viable.
So what is your final selection of turkey gauge?
I want to do a 410 because it has no recoil. It's novel, it's cute, it's functional.
Lightweight.
Lightweight. I'm probably going to stay with 20 gauge though. I want the utility, I want the pellet count. You and I have hunted turkeys all over the country. You never know what you're going to end up with. If a tom busts you and he's hanging up at a long distance, or if you've got a moving shot and you need pellet count to anchor that bird, there's nothing wrong with a little bit of insurance. I think though, if you are looking for a super lightweight gun that ammunition is available for and specialized for, a 410, wow.
I mean, or maybe you're recoil sensitive. You know, maybe you're a small statured person. You know, a 410, a 28, or a 20, they're all going to be a little bit nicer on you than the 12. I've always been a 12 guy, again, going with that bigger is better, but then seeing what we've seen through this process, I really like that 28. I really like the 410. I think, like you, I'd probably settle on the 20, and that's no knocks on any of the other ones. Part of that comes down to ammo availability and selection there too. So it's really hard for me to decide. I think for me, even personally, it's like that depends. But if I was gonna pick one that I might transition to, I'd probably look at the 20. Did we maybe just selfishly assign to ourselves what we think is the best turkey gauge, Ryan?
Perhaps. But the good news is Mossberg's come to the table with some extraordinarily impressive offerings. They've always been innovators in this field, first company to come out with a commercially available 3.5-inch 12 gauge. And they've got all these turkey-specific models that I think do the job just famously. By that, I mean the 500s that we tested, the 835s that we tested, all come pocket cut to fit a red dot like the Defender series, CCW specifically. They've got a camo pattern, that's all the rage in turkey hunting. Performance choke tubes out of the box as well. We did change these over to a Jebs. I think either way you skin it, you end up with a heck of an option. Any of the gauges we tested, I'm in.
I mean, I love it. They come cut, they're optics ready. They keep the whole package very trim, very streamlined. I feel like some people, maybe they have an opposition to using a red dot because of the form factor. This is as sleek as it gets and is gonna improve your performance. So there you have it. I know this was a fun one for us. Hopefully it helped you choose the best turkey gauge for you. Tune into the Vortex Nation podcast where Ryan and I see if we can poke holes in our results.